Happy to be in Paris and participating in this T7 meeting, and thanks to Ifri. Discussions were very interesting today at our summit. I think we have to also acknowledge that organizers have invited African think tanks, which we're part of it as a Moroccan think tank. And issues were addressed about, of course, trade and the big challenges of trade with ongoing so-called trade war between China and the US. But on issues related to development, I think what is sort of expected from the G7 is also leadership, which is very important in its relation with particularly Africa in the area of development policies, and in particular in terms of keeping the commitments to an open trade system and rule-based system. Important to acknowledge also that Africa has just 22 countries have just signed a free trade agreement, and so it is now coming into force, and the continent remains very much open to free trade and the benefits of trade and the rule-based system. So we count also on the G7 to reaffirm that position, although we are very well aware of ongoing challenges on that front. Important also are the reform of financing development with many institutions that are belong to G7 country, but not only, also the multilateral institutions, which we think should be basically producing public goods for Africa, particularly, not only but mainly Africa, and boosting in a way economic growth and producing those public goods for Africa, meaning, in terms of climate, renewable energy, infrastructure, financing, and also, of course, education, which will be key in the coming future. There are a few more precise ideas. Let's say, for instance, interconnected and integrated energy market between Europe and Africa, where renewable and particularly solar energy, wind, could bring a significant contribution to change in the energy mix in Africa, which could in Europe, producing those massively in Africa would make sense for Africa and for Europe at the same time. So there are other examples in network infrastructure and human mobility where there could be interesting cooperations and partnership between G7 through multilateral institution and bilateral development agency. Again, here to finance this kind of large infrastructure will require important flow of capital, and of course to leverage the private flows through this impulse from public money, which could come in the form of guarantee. So in a nutshell, to summarize, I think first, leadership is expected from the G7 in terms of reforming development finance, particularly for the 21st century and for Africa. And second, focusing more on the providing the public goods for development in a way that is mutually beneficial, particularly for Africa and members of the G7 countries. In terms of how a country like Morocco see itself within all that, I think it remains committed to rule-based multilateral trade system in particular, and stand ready to bring its contributions in terms of providing those public goods, and particularly given its geographical position in terms of network infrastructure. Just mentioned the energy with more closer relation between the European energy market and Africa. That's one of the example. Others include, of course, anything that has to do with capacity building, contributing also to others address the challenges of development of other countries as well. So we look forward to the G7 meeting next week here in Paris to reaffirm this commitment to, in a way, reshape development policies for the 21st century and the challenges of the 21st century, which in terms of development are not only but mainly in Africa, and particularly the relation of the role of France in its relation with the continent, but more generally European Union and Africa, which are in a way linked together in their destiny. Thank you.